Hello and welcome to episode 102, Navigating the Legalities of Off-World Settlements, Governing Moon Bases, Mars Colonies, and Space Weapons. We have discussed this topic from several aspects in the industry, primarily looking at the policy perspective, but the legal perspective is something that has been quite missing in the bits and pieces during the previous discussion with several other experts on the podcast. So today, to take a deep dive into this topic, we have with us Tanushree Joshi. Hi, Tanushree. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Omkar.
Thank you, Tanushree, for your precious time. I know it's quite a busy time for the industry, both on the events and the business scale too. So, without any delay, we will definitely, move towards the topic. But before that, can you just briefly introduce about yourself, like how you ended up doing the things that you're doing at the moment?
Yes. Firstly, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And I'm really glad to share my thoughts on this topic. So, I started my journey as a space lawyer itself. I graduated from a law school in Pune and directly started working with a rocket company in India, which happened to be the first private uh, launch vehicle company in India. And therein, I also came across my profile had both legal and business development. And I continue doing that even with the current company that I'm working with, which is a satellite company. So my daily work is with respect to advising on legal matters, strategies to overcome regulatory challenges, or fostering strategic partnerships globally, and also contribute to business expansion. So this is a brief about what I do on a daily basis.
Interesting. So, I mean, you're from a legal background, so I would like to take a jump directly on the international scale now. So, what are the key international treaties currently governing the establishments of off-world settlements?
Uh, so anything and everything that is governed in or in relation to the outer space related activities, there are five main treaties that come in. The first is the Outer Space Treaty, which is also known as the Magna Carta, or we can simplify it as the Constitution for all outer space related activities. I would be referring to that as the OST in this podcast. Then we have the Registration Convention, we have the Liability Convention, the Rescue Agreement, and the Moon Agreement. The Moon Agreement, although is not ratified by most state parties or nations, it is still a step to promote international cooperation on Moon and its resources. And apart from that, we have a lot of international agreements. You have bilateral treaties between states and so on, which govern your outer space related activities, including off-world settlements.
Interesting. As you mentioned about the agreements and cooperation, so this is a very common question, related to the outer space treaty. So, as we are discussing this topic on related to Moon and Mars, I would like to come to this point. So, how does the outer space treaty impact the legal framework for building bases on the Moon and Mars? I mean, you can answer this in perspective whether building bases for the human exploration, or just maybe kind of having set up laboratories or observatories. Anything from your perspective, you can answer this question.
So, firstly, it's a very tricky question. I would like to understand the nature of building bases or settlements, even from the human perspective. So, what do you exactly mean by building bases or settlements?
So, I mean, building bases in the sense maybe trying to build a habitat, basically, for the people who might be, working in minings, working in trying to explore, scientists, they're having their habitats over there. And of course, as we have the human habitats, things start to kind of evolve over there. We have, we might have a natural birth taking place in those moon bases or the Mars bases as well in the future. So from that perspective, can you briefly touch up on this point?
Yes. So, the purpose of asking that was it all depends on the nature of the activity that you conduct. If it is for military purposes, there is an article under the OST which says that you cannot establish military bases or installations or have any kind of weapons or even conduct certain military activities. But at the same time, if it is for peaceful purposes, then you can use your military personnel to conduct your scientific research or even carry out other peaceful purposes. Um, However, there is a very important article which says that the outer space, including the moon, or you refer to any celestial body, you cannot appropriate it. There cannot be any state claiming ownership on it, either by means of use or occupation or through any other means. So, yes, the Outer Space Treaty is or very much impacts the legal foundation of framework concerning your activities, which the Outer Space Treaty, as I said earlier, is the foundation, and rest treaties are expansion of the principles laid down in the Outer Space Treaty. It is a document that majorly governs all your activities with respect to conducting activities on moon or any other celestial body.
Interesting. I think you have already mentioned this existing space laws addressing this lunar and Martian related stuff. So, how can we ensure the rights and responsibilities of private entities involved in space colonization? Are they even clearly defined? Because I believe as we proceed ahead, the involvement of private and commercial private entities, especially, is going to be quite a lot. The influx is going to increase. So, from that perspective, can you briefly tell us about the rights and responsibilities of the private entities in space
Yes.
colonization? Yeah.
And I have a question again for you. Is space colonization even permitted?
I'm not sure though, but the way things are going at the moment, I mean, I'm asking this question from a perspective where terrestrial conflicts are affecting the cooperation in space.
Mhm.
We don't know what kind of steps ILRS will be taking basically with respect to Russia and China. We don't know what's going to happen, because the kind of aggressive nature these countries have in terms of grabbing the economic resources. We don't really know what kind of nature we will be exposed to of such, I would say, countries which are very much inclined towards dictatorship. So this question is more from that perspective. Yeah.
Okay. So, like I mentioned before, there is no national appropriation that's allowed. So, either by claiming sovereignty or doing any activities, like by using anything or occupying it or by any other means. Now, this term, any other means, is very open to interpretation and is not restrictive in nature. But like you mentioned, there is a rise in the private participation in outer space related activities. And that is also not at or restrained to a particular region, but this is on a global scale. So many a times nations also refer to space as the fourth pillar of economy. And
Yes.
I believe that if there is an increase in the private participation, which contributes to this economy, it is also important for us to protect their rights.
Yes.
So if you take a look at the way the current framework or in the way the industry currently works, is either the activities are carried out by the government itself. Until now, outer space related activities were only restricted to governments. In certain nations, ownership of a space asset or a private entity having ownership or trying to conduct its own activities was not permitted. Everything was in the name of the state. However, that is changing now. So you also have today activities carried out by private sector, or there's a collaboration between both government and private sector, or there are international organizations.
Interesting.
However, the state is ultimately responsible for it. So no matter which company and from which country they're carrying out activities, there are certain ways in which a state can be responsible. There is also a concept of launching state, which draws liability for activities conducted by either the company based in that particular state or the government itself. So I believe, or to put it correctly, the rights and responsibilities of private entities for carrying out activities other than colonization currently
Yeah.
lies in the national laws, or if it is a program or a joint collaboration between companies or between a company and government of two different countries, Then you have bilateral investment treaty. This is a very important topic from an investment perspective, because if you take a look at the industry, it's a very capital intensive industry.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, your rights, where these rights stem from, the same authority is also responsible in protecting it as well. And to your question, as ownership of moon celestial bodies is not allowed, it is not currently even legally recognized. Like you mentioned about the current scenarios on Earth and the way it can shape up on activities in the outer space. You may have heard about rumors of certain companies, organizations, or individuals owning land or even selling that land on moon or other celestial bodies.
Okay.
So
All right.
these are not legally recognized. Like simply adding words on a paper does not make it a valid contract. So all of these claims of companies owning or selling moon are not legal, as they do not have the authority to do so. So yeah, I hope this answers to your question.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's pretty much clear to the people who are living, in a kind of fictional world. It pretty much answers or, kind of gives them a hardboard reality. So yeah, coming to the part, I think you have covered the international cooperation's legal approach in a brief manner, I would say. So moving forward with the resources point of view. So what are the potential legal implications of resource extraction on the moon and Mars? Because I believe the whole point of venturing out there is the resources, because that's the kind of the gold mine that every government or even the private sector or even the military sector is trying to look at. So what are your thoughts on this?
So with respect to resources, there are two things over here. Uh, there is a stance that this also belongs to the global commons. As we all know that ownership of any of the celestial body or moon is not permitted. It is known as the common heritage of mankind. So this is the principle that we go ahead with. And we call certain resources as global commons. There is the prospect of extracting resources, and we currently see that a lot of companies from either asteroids or other celestial bodies have conducted certain mining activities, wherein certain of these resources also have been brought back to Earth. This all again raises a question of property rights and how do you manage these resources. You currently have countries like United States, Luxembourg, Japan, which regulate space mining activities. However, there is nothing much on a binding international framework on this, because it's very important from a perspective that you need to balance the stakeholders of different spacefaring nations, private companies, governments. Uh, the first in itself is what is a space resource. So defining that is, I think, very crucial. Uh, the potential legal implications of resource extraction at first is who can claim ownership of that. If today I say that the property is something that is owned by all, or if it's a common heritage of mankind, can I claim access to the resources or to the data that you retrieve? It may be research or anything from that. So that debate still goes on. In my opinion, if you say that you cannot own a land, however, you can have your own research center on the surface of moon that you can claim ownership on. So currently coming back to the space resources, I think space resource ultimately is also something that you're extracting out of the moon or any other celestial bodies. So in a way, if you claim ownership on this resource, you are also claiming your or appropriating it either nationally or in the garb of a private company. You are still claiming an ownership on the resource. So I believe it is a national appropriation by, or in the sense of utilizing it. And it's a very confusing domain. There is no a straightforward answer to this. again, there are two things. There is in space, in situ resource utilization, wherein whatever you mine in the outer space, you utilize it then and there itself, or you mine it and you get it back to Earth. So the second business model may not be very feasible in terms of from a finance perspective. So in the first case, there are again debates that this, as it's utilized in the outer space itself, you are free to explore and use the outer space. Uh, a lot of people do claim this as an exception and state that this is permitted in the outer space. However, I believe until unless there is no a clear, unified legal framework governing this, it's going to be a bit confusing because there is a lot of difference in the way uh, the state parties are conducting activities. On one side, we have states who have already proven their technology in outer space and are now enacting national legislations which regulate space mining activities or which permit ownership of that. And on the other hand, we have upcoming spacefaring nations where they're about to launch first satellite in space. So we have to be careful on how we balance this and we keep it in the interest of all.
Yeah, that's a quite a wide overview, I would say. Uh, and coming to the point, because I always relate the fact that the maritime law and the space law are quite similar, and the kind of situation that we are seeing in South China Sea, the way China is trying to grasp this coming question is basically kind of evolved from the terrestrial conflicts. I would say that's the reason I have framed this question. So we are seeing that there might be a militarization of space. I would say it is there already. That it has started already, but the escalation into an arms race it has not yet fully started in the space domain yet, except the anti-satellite missile test and all. So with respect to that, how can we basically prevent the militarization of space from escalating into an arms race? And primarily, are there any even ways to regulate the space-based weapons, or if at all, maybe two countries get into conflict in space itself, what are the primary ways to basically get it resolved? Because I believe if things escalate in space, I think it's a kind of a defeat for both the parties. Everyone is going to lose out on the resources and everything. So is there any way that you can basically put this in a kind of a good answer and let us know what are the existing things that are there?
Yes, it's sort of a lot of tricky questions in this podcast that I've been put to answer. But like you mentioned about militarization of space, that it has started.
Yeah.
Uh, as we all know that we had World War II, and after that there came an era of Cold War. In order to prevent that and to prevent escalation of this to outer space, we had the OST, or the Outer Space Treaty, uh, that came out, that the committee undertook to publish.
Yes.
This treaty is something that governed or stated principles that you cannot claim ownership, that the outer space belongs to all. So these principles were very important. And most importantly, if you take a look at any agreement treaty with respect to outer space and outer space related activities, it focuses a lot and pushes for international cooperation.
Yes.
So this is for a reason that the technology involved in this is obviously always evolving, but is very complex. So you need to have one single state cannot carry out this activity. There's a lot of cooperation involved. I always say that this industry is very competitive, but at the same time, it's also very cooperative. And if you ask me about militarization of outer space, there have been ways and means to prevent it. Because as you likely said, if if there is one country that conducts certain activities, we should always understand that activities conducted by one party can affect all the other parties. By parties, I mean nations on Earth.
Yes.
So it's very important that we don't give a lot of freedom, or we also don't have this ways and means of easing out the business so much because at times it's also very much possible that just under the garb of a private company or a private entity, there can be military or I wouldn't say defense, but I would say the offensive side or the attack that we generally call it as or refer to as. It can, all of these activities can be conducted under the garb of a private company. And if you take a look at the way even globally the policies and regulations are coming up, certain countries have come up with ease of doing business. But we need to ensure that this is also balanced with understanding the kind of technology it is and how much of a harm or damage it can cause. So we need to strike this balance between ease of doing business and also regulating and permitting only certain types or kinds of activities. Because, yes, I think that all the activity with or is a result of the arms race. And we all know that something that starts with trade, or like we say it in Hindi, itihas gawah hai, or translated literally, history speaks for itself. What starts simply as a trade business or a trading company can quickly also turn into colonization.
Absolutely.
So
It's
similarly,
yeah.
so similarly, if these kind of activities are permitted or we let go, it can very well be concluded as a state practice. I will also maybe share on what soft law is or what customary international law is maybe sometime later in the podcast. But if this continues, it can slowly turn into an international law. So we have to be very careful.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, coming because we are almost reaching the end of the episode. So, from your perspective, what are the future prospects for updating or creating new space treaties to better accommodate emerging technologies and settlement plans? Because I believe the way expansion is happening of the space industry, both on the technology side, on the business side, and even the nations, even the several, kind of emerging nations whose economies kind of, underdeveloped or is developing, are even participating in the industry. So, what kind of, treaties can be initiated to better, kind of accommodate and help run the international cooperation in a much more smoother way?
Yes, this is very much the need of the hour for a reason that there are a lot of things coming up. The technology has its own pace of developing. But at the same time, the law is not able to catch its pace. So if we take a look at the time when Outer Space Treaty and all these other treaties evolved, they were very far-reaching in terms of its governance. Laws were always very proactive in nature back then. However, we are not able to continue it today for a reason that it is very difficult to get consensus of all the states or all the state parties on a single point of international law. I'm referring to this as international law because space law is just a specialized branch of the general international law. So if we take a look at how we need to pace up and we need to accommodate the emerging technologies and also other activities that we may see now or in the upcoming years, is firstly to go back to the time that we had these treaties established and get clarity on the definitions first. As you know that a lot of these things are still not addressed. Simple terms that what a space object is, or where does your airspace end and outer space begin. I think these are very important definitions that all the state parties need to agree to. If we take a look at the national laws governing space of different spacefaring nations or countries who just have these Space Act in place, sometimes they say that an orbital flight can be considered something beyond 80 kilometers. At times, this same boundary is extended up to 100 kilometers or 120 kilometers. So the entire question then comes up to whether this is or comes under the purview of international law or not? Or is this still a sovereign space? So not having clarity on that can lead to a lot of issues. However, then comes the point of international cooperation.
Yeah.
To just mention here, there have been challenges, and I would just refer to certain uh, examples here. So the United Nations came up with a convention on contracts for international state of goods. And
Yes.
the, uh, there was also something called as UNIDROIT, which is unification of your private law for contracts. So these were steps taken or attempts towards harmonizing international contract law. However, uh, currently the same has been questioned. Are these two, uh, attempts even adequate? Because it all is under a debate currently. Because at times countries are hoping that the same framework continues. On the other hand, countries are focusing that we need an entirely new framework to harmonize general contract law. So
Yes.
we need to first address basic definitions. All countries need to come to that. And there are ways and means you can simply pass a general resolution to which all major countries, or you can have a majority passing it, and then it turns into an international law. Or it can be a customary international practice. So if major state practices are, agreeing and also reflecting the same in their national state practices or laws, this can be very much established as a customary international law. So international cooperation is very important. So the entire concept that if it affects one country, it's going to affect all the countries. If we continue with the same clarity in head, I think we will be able to reach on the unified
Yeah.
definition one day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe quite a lot of, I would say, legal perspectives we have covered in the episode. And I hope, as you mentioned about the soft law, maybe a good way to create some more episodes, especially navigating the legalities of the space applications in the terrestrial businesses,
Mhm.
what kind of complexities space companies face in today's business world, what kind of laws exist in different countries. For example, we can discuss, of course, this in next episode. Uh, for example, there is a interesting case of Finland, where the government didn't create the space law. It's because of the company ISI, that is a Finnish SAR satellite operator. They came into existence, and because of them, the space law came into the existence, the National Space Law of Finland. This is a very interesting case, where the private companies have pushed the bondage to kind of scale up the national level stuff in the space industry. So, I mean, this kind of things will be interesting to discuss in the next episode. I'd be glad to have you again, of course. But yeah, I mean, we have mostly covered, but I believe there are still some gaps that need to be covered. Maybe in next episode, we'll be covering it. And this last question, Tanushree, is related to I would say the kind of audience we have at the moment, people who listen to this podcast, because I believe every expert who gets on this podcast has something or the other to offer in terms of anecdotes. So you can answer this question from your perspective. What message would you like to give to the student researchers and experts who are working or either trying to make their way into the space industry?
Yes. Before I answer that, I would just like to give an example. Artemis Accords, if we take
Yeah.
a look at it, is a perfect example of how we're trying to reach an agreement at an international level. There have been a lot of signatories already, and that is still growing. So it just talks about international cooperation and lays out certain other principles. If you take a look at it, is something that NASA has started with other entities in the US, and we see nations signing this. So it's a
Yeah.
perfect example of soft law, and I'll be happy to cover it sometime later. Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
so apart from that, when it comes to individuals who are trying to get into this industry, or you have researchers, students, experts, if again we take a look at the space industry, it's a mixture of people with various backgrounds. I myself come with a complete legal background, but here I am today, selling capacities on rockets and launching satellites to space.
Yeah.
So I believe interest in understanding how the industry works, having interest to learn on the tech side also. It can be a very simple understanding of how the business works or how your product works. Also helps you to understand what are the problems faced by not just you or your company, but also by the industry as such. And that really helps you get a clarity on how you can overcome these challenges. So even on space policy, when there are people coming with or who want to explore space policy as a career, but coming with a technical background, I would say that they have they have a better advantage in this because they come up with the understanding of tech. And if you then take a look at or understand how international law is, what are the main treaties governing space law, you would be very much in demand in this industry right
Yeah.
now. So one message would be just to keep yourself updated with the activities that are taking place on a global scale as well as what's happening in your own nation, uh, understanding what the tech is, and and networking. It's very important. It's a very cooperative industry, so I'm pretty sure there'll be people happy to help you or uh, give you access to a certain other companies or
Yeah.
resources also. So yeah, this is what I would like to just um, say to the researchers or students or people willing to join this industry.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Dhanushri, for your wonderful insights. And I hope to record a few more episodes with you in the future. As I said, we have discussed anything beyond Earth at the moment, and we really need to discuss things on Earth at the moment also, because I believe the real business is going on Earth at the moment. The use of space applications, yeah, that's where I think the gold mine is. Of course, space exploration is important, the way things are going. But of course, we need to also focus on the terrestrial applications because that's something that will help the industry launch into the kind of, the farther goal of reaching towards the space exploration. So yeah, I'll be happy to record few more episodes with you in the future, uh, especially related to, the laws and the kind of policies which exist for the space companies, because that's the topic also we haven't really explored on the podcast. I mean, legal and the policy aspect is something that we have never explored on the podcast. And this is, I think, the benchmark episode which will be kickstarting it. So thank you very much again for your time, and see you soon. Hope to see you again in the space events, maybe.
So thanks a lot, Oka. And I think before we close this, just another question to the audience or you.
Yeah.
Would Earth observational data taken by a third nation uh, of, of or of any other particular nation
Yeah.
also qualify as a weapon? Because I think that
Yeah.
you access to the very base and land and territories of a
Absolutely.
sovereign state. So would that qualify as a weapon? I think you can try covering that. But thanks a lot for having me, and I really enjoyed this. Looking forward to many more such episodes. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.